Welcome to Entrepreneurs, Business, and Finance, the podcast. We are fortunate enough on the show today to have Don Short, and he is the founder and co-owner of New Artisan Distillery. The brand name is Roxor. And I was fortunate enough to visit the distillery, which he is sitting in now. That's their nice part of their nice reception area. Behind it, they have a very large warehouse, which he'll share with us. But we got a tour of that. And it was an Emory University alumni event. His wife went to Emory. We haven't spoke about this yet, but we think we'll probably know some of the same people because we were there around the same time. And Don has had an interesting career and very successful career that included business all around the world prior to starting this distillery that led him to, upon retirement from his first career, to start a second career, retirement career, passion project, money making too. And that's what we're excited to hear about today. So welcome to the show, Don.
Henry, thank you. Thanks for having us. It was great to have the Emory alumni. That's our second time that you guys have come over. And it looks like we may make it an annual event. So everybody had a great time. And it's just a joy. My wife did go to Emory, and so she is passionate about the university. And I've done some work and spoken at the university a couple of times at the Goizueta School of Business, which sort of links me to my career. So after college, I graduated, and then I became an entry-level employee for the Coca-Cola company. And I had the coast of South Carolina as my territory, which indeed was a beautiful territory. I moved about 7 times within the United States, ending up in 14 years as the vice president for the 7 or 8 state area outside of Dallas. And we manage the food service business. So it's interesting in that it's a binary sale. You generally will have Coke or have Pepsi. You tend not to have both machines in the same location. And so I think that pretty well honed your sales skills as you really are fighting to keep an account, you're fighting to gain an account, you're fighting not to lose an account. And so you become very hyper-focused, and indeed the cola wars were real, very real in the United States. So in 1992, though, I was in Dallas and I got a call one night, and it was a friend from Tokyo who said, "Would you please come move and take a more senior role in Japan?" I flew over the next week and agreed to do it, and incidentally, Ann and I got married just before, and so we began our life in Japan. So it was a wonderful start there. So I was a senior VP, ran all of sales for Coca-Cola Japan, which is a billion-dollar plus business that launches 100 new products a year. So, and it's a business that we think in the United States of Coke or Diet Coke or Sprite, that business 25% is coffee, 25% is tea, 25% is carbonated soft drinks, and 25% is all other. So it's a very unique and very diversified business and highly profitable, needless to say. After that, I was there almost 5 years and got a call and was asked if I would move to India. To demonstrate our family's flexibility, I moved from Japan to India is about as diverse as you can get. But we said yes, and we had a young family at that point, 2 young children, but off we go to India, and I was president and CEO for Coca-Cola India for 3 years. It was a very unique situation. Some previous CEOs had really wanted to push Coke as the primary product. And it turned out in that market, we owned Thumbs Up was a spicy cola. We owned Limca. We owned a variety of other products. And ironically, as an interview with Wall Street Journal one day, the reporter asked me why I had been successful in India. And it was almost humorous to me because having lived in Texas before, the concept in my mind was if you own Coke and you own Dr. Pepper in the same market, you would virtually own the market. And so when I went to India and I saw this brand Thumbs Up, which was a spicy cola, I thought, wow, we should just be booming. And so in a market where most of the money had been put on Coke to advertise, I split the budget in half and gave half to both Coke and half to Thumbs Up. And it turned out they both started growing. So I don't know that I was that smart, but I certainly had some background history that led me to believe that we should in fact, embrace a national brand that we now owned. And so that, in fact, is what I did. So we lived in India for 3 years, lived in Delhi. We were in a pathway of repurchasing all of the franchise bottlers, or most of them. And so there were highs and lows, but overall, it was a wonderful family experience. I then we moved to London after that, and I was CEO for Coke Africa and the Middle East. And so in that role, a more senior role, and there were only 5 group presidents in the world. So having Africa and the Middle East was pretty unique. In general, I would go, if I was in Africa, I'd go see the president of each country as sort of the first stop as I enter that country.
And that is really, let's focus on that a second, because that is something you mentioned when we were talking the other night. And that gives you the magnitude of the scale of employment and impact that Coca-Cola has had on the world. I mean, part of the reason I went to Emory is because Coca-Cola's founder, Woodruff, had just donated $100 million. And my sister was there and said, hey, Atlanta's growing, you ought to check out Emory. I mean, the impact that Coca-Cola's had around the world, and your impact is part of that country, part of that company, in countries like Africa, where you go into a country and the president of that country meets you. I just didn't want that to slip by, because that's kind of a pretty astounding fact.
Right. Let me give you a kind of an interesting story, and it gets to the point that you just made. I was in Ghana, and I go to see President Jerry Rawlings, who's the president, and we go to his estate, and it's out on the waterfront. And it was a little bit staged in that I knew what he was going to say to me, and I knew what I was going to say to him. But for the press, this became important. So I walk in, we greet each other, and he said, I want you to know that you created 7,000 jobs last year. And I said, Mr. President, I couldn't have done it without you. So the interesting story was, he had given us 7,000 street corners without a real lease applied to those street corners. We had then gotten 7,000 card tables, 7,000 igloo coolers, 7,000 umbrellas, and we bought a crate of Cokes. Everything, 90% of the business was in returnable glass bottles in the old wooden crates that you remember. So we bought 7,000 people that didn't have jobs a crate of Cokes, and we got them a nice source so they could chill the Cokes. They sold the first crate of Cokes, and that gave them enough revenue to buy the second crate of Cokes, which in fact created 7,000 jobs. So sometimes it's just, people think of Coke as just the sugary product sometimes. And one, the portfolio is very diverse these days. But secondly, it's a lot of goodwill as you're the largest employer in Africa. So you have to be a part of the community and work hard at doing the right thing. And so I think we did that. So I stayed there, and I got a call. Coke was going to do a joint venture with Procter & Gamble, and they were both putting Minute Maid assets in there, Pringles, Sunny Delight. And so I was asked to be the CEO of this new company, $5 billion company. It fell apart during valuation, and our chairman said, well, you're already in the US now. Why don't you like healthy things? Why don't you just go to Minute Maid? And that was in Houston. And so I went to Minute Maid as the CEO there. And it was there that we were hiring a lot of PhDs to do clinical work, and we made products like Minute Maid Heartwise that had plant sterols to lower your cholesterol. So I had a diverse group of consultants as PhDs. One of those guys was Robert Del Grande, who is a well-known James Beard awarded chef, but he has a PhD in biochemistry. And so he was one of our consultants, and turned out he's one of my best friends. And so I'm reaching then the age of 54, 55. And so I've decided to retire, and that's after 31 years at Coke. And so I have a conversation with Robert over lunch, and I said, I don't think I'm really going to retire. I think I've got to go do something else. I don't think I can play that much golf. And would you like to do something with me? If you'll do the science, because you got a PhD, I'll do the marketing. So he said yes. And so we started down this pathway almost 15 years ago. And I looked at a couple of different products, but with Robert, I was thinking of alcohol And I didn't care if it was beer, wine, or spirits. And so after long discussions, we decided that we would sort of enter the spirit space. And there were a couple of reasons behind that. Generally, I thought beer was kind of, craft beer was oversold at that point. I actually thought the same of wine, and I thought spirits were still growing quite nicely at that point. Secondly, if you think about beer bottles or beer cans or wine bottles, generally they're generic and you differentiate your product with a label. And so, but with spirits, you're able to customize your product. And so for me, that was sort of an intriguing idea because as we grew up at Coke, when the lights go out, when you reach in your fridge, you'll know the Coke bottle by its contour shape. And so likewise, I felt like a spirits bottle, we could kind of own that uniqueness of a package so that, again, when the lights go off, you would feel this package and show you. I'm going to pick up the bottle just to give you an idea.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So Robert and I had one agreement. The agreement was this: we won't call any consultants and ask for help because we had been both had long careers, and we wanted to see if we could build a brand by ourselves without a lot of help. So on the package, you'll see that this looks quite a bit like a building, and it's inspired by architecture, and particularly by the architecture of Frank Lloyd Wright and other great architects. And so this is called the Skyline Bottle. It's a toast to the architects that create the skylines of our lives. So uniquely, even the package has its own name. And then the name is Roxor, which, if you can see this, we say on the rocks, shaken or stirred. And so that's the idea of helping people pronounce it. And it's a nod to the cocktail culture. So this happens to be Texas First Gin. The second product we made was a very unique botanical bourbon. As you look around the distillery, the tasting room, you would be seeing green drapes, green furniture. So there's this idea of greenness. And the strategy of the company is, how can you use real plants to make better spirits? I could make this gin probably with an eyedropper, with some juniper extract and some other plants, but we choose to use the real plant, and that's simply by design. And we do think that, in fact, it gives you a better product. So Robert has gone down the pathway to create each of the products. I've gone down the pathway to create the packages. For the bourbon, for example, I've taken the same concept, but I've just put it on a larger footprint, and that allows us to squat it down to look more like a decanter, whereas you see the gin bottle, of course, is going to be a lot taller. So those are the first two products we created. And again, you can see the plan idea coming through. The final one that we've just finished and is just being released now is called Fleur de Vodka, Flowers of Vodka. So we've actually distilled a super premium neutral grain spirit with flowers, and then we add minerals back to the water for a little texture and mouthfeel. So very unique product, taste test against Grey Goose and Belvedere, and our vodka holds up quite well against anybody. So that's a little bit about the brands, about my interaction with Robert. Again, it's just our skill sets are so diverse that we don't step on each other at all. In fact, we just complement each other, I think, because I'm more on the marketing side and he is really on the science side. And he comes for every distillation, and he runs the stills with a deft touch. It's just, I'm amazed at how he can do that.
The still, as we mentioned, is right behind you because you're in a fairly large warehouse building with a nice office in front. And how many thousand square feet do you have space you have back there?
We're 7,500 square feet, about 1,000 up front, 1,200 up front, about 6,500 in the back. I think I'm going to be able to just grab my computer and kind of at least give you a look in the back. Would that be helpful?
That would be very helpful, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's really neat to see all that equipment. It's beautiful equipment.
Yeah, let's see if we can do this. If I can pull this off. Okay, we have a large garage door, which I'm heading back toward. It's Monday morning early here now, so we're just sort of getting going. But we'll open the tasting lounge this afternoon.
temperature in Dallas is hot today. So back of the warehouse is not air conditioned. But can you see this still?
Yeah, we see the still.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
That's a 300-gallon combination still where the kettle sits on the left, the column sits in the middle, and then we have a large 700-gallon mash tun to the right, and that's where we will make bourbon, although today we're bringing bourbon in directly from a very large bourbon maker. This is also event space, so weddings, funerals, you name it, we have them here. And on this wall, you're going to see fermenters. That becomes important in the bourbon making process when you make bourbon from scratch out of the mash tun. We do all the labeling here. This is a labeling machine over to the corner and hand bottling. So literally all of these products, we touch every bottle more than once usually. Back in the tasting lounge, I'll just give you an idea of the merchandise room. So lots of stuff as guests come in, they're able to buy up to 4 bottles, and we have everything from barrels to hats and shirts and decanters for everybody. How's that, Henry? Does that help?
Yeah, it's terrific. Yeah, it really helps a lot.
Yeah.
And what I was interested in, among so many other things, was that this is a unique product. You're actually adventuring into some new territory, using the real plants, and the taste of the gin was, for my flavor, the best I've tasted, and it wasn't like anything else that I'd had. And I'm not a heavy drinker, but if I do drink spirits, gin is one of mine, and I really just liked it.
Yeah, maybe I'll give you a little background. So as it turns out, Robert's wife doesn't like gin. And so one of our ideas was, let's find a way to appeal to someone who may have had a bad gin experience, which happened a lot in college, a lot by kids drinking their dad's gin, which might not have been very good. So the first thing we do is we're taking fresh grapefruit and lime peels, and we take that from a local juice company, Buddha Juice, which I'm on their board. And so literally they're squeezing juice for HEB, and I'm taking their used hulls, which is still where all the flavor is. And so those used hulls we steep for 14 hours or so with all the other botanicals. But it gives the gin a citrus note on the aroma when you smell it. Usually gin smells like juniper berry, which is sort of like a Christmas tree. And if you ever were sick from a bad round of gin, it just is not something you want to go back to. And so by giving it the citrus nose, you sort of change the perception of the consumer immediately right out of the box. And then he's found a way to use 12 plants and to have it at 90 proof, to still have it be remarkably smooth, so that when you taste it on just a cube of ice, it's actually very consumable and very flavorful, and it doesn't have the harsh bites that some gins might have. And so that's all by design.
One of the things too that I think you're a modest man, and CEO of a huge division of Coca-Cola. I believe you said one of the 5 CEOs of multiple territories, and then of course India, the population is so big.
Right.
There is a whole marketing thing. Obviously, you've got to get the word out with any product, but you also have to know how to make these bottles. You also have to know how to find all this equipment and do the accounting and the shipping. And there is a business aspect to this too. It's not, you just can't make it and market it. Someone has to actually run the business aspect of it as well. And
I think that might have even been I thought we should stay in beverages because I felt like I knew beverages, and in some ways that helps a lot. Turns out the distribution system is somewhat different in that distributors are really strong. Of course, Coke bottlers are really strong, but you at least have some more checks and balances, I believe, with our Coke bottlers than you do with a distributor who has a government license that is never rescinded for poor performance or anything of that nature. And so a lot of the control, particularly of a small company, boutique company like ours, is a lot of that control rests with the distributor. And it's a 3-tiered system. So you have retailers that sell alcohol, you have distributors that have to handle alcohol, and then you have makers, of which we're the maker. But you have to have that three-tiered system, and one part of it is not supposed to be engaged in the second part. They're supposed to have firewalls to keep everybody separate. And but nonetheless, you have to go figure out the system and make it grow. And then we see what's happening now is that we're able to sell online to about 40 states, and so that's helpful to get directly to the consumer also, as well as being in retail stores and restaurants and bars.
My questions I like to ask is, what are some of the challenges that you faced? That sounds like that was one of them.
Yeah, I would say.
Going to a new.
Yeah, that's probably the largest. How do you get, you have a unique proposition, and at least I think that's what we do. Both the gin, the world's first botanical bourbon is certainly unique, and it has small amounts of 20 exotic botanicals go in the barrel with the bourbon for 6 months, and it gives the bourbon smoothness and complexity you wouldn't expect from a young bourbon. But nonetheless, you're having to go to the retail stores to ask them to handle the product. There's pricing you have to manage through that. You then have to go back to get the pull through off the shelf. And so you're in stores doing tastings with consumers in those states that allow that. For example, we probably will do 100 tastings in the state of Texas just this year. And so with that, myself or one of our reps or somebody we hire to go out for 3 hours and just taste the product with consumers and give them the chance to buy it. So that's how you're slowly building. This month, we have a billboard that's within 5 miles of the distillery. It's pointing the way to the exit to come to the distillery for a visit, because this tasting lounge, this is a perfect venue for us to tell our story. Again, through the plants, they get to see it, they get to smell them, that sort of thing, to the experience in the back, and then to have cocktails in the room, and then to take bottles home with them. Those are all, that's one of the big advantages of that. And the government has given small craft spirits companies an excise incentive to allow us to invest in our brands and that sort of thing. So that's a very positive. I would say the distribution is probably the hardest, because you can't self-distribute. And so that's been one of the more difficult. Through COVID, I really didn't have a lot of problem with glass. We make the glass in Mexico City by 3 artisan brothers who make mini tequila bottles. But remember, Mexico City is adjacent to Texas, and so you need glass, you can drive the truck. And so I know a lot of people who had a lot more problems through China and some places where they were sourcing, that it just became difficult to get glass during COVID. But those are typical small company trying to make it in a company with giants. It is not easy.
Did you anticipate? I know you didn't anticipate every problem. You have an adventurous spirit. Went all over the world, starting a new business. Is it harder than you thought it would be? About the same, or did you anticipate a lot of these issues?
I think it's harder than I thought I would guess. It was harder than I thought. And yet maybe it's more rewarding, because our fingerprints are all over the package, the recipe, and everything. And I think we built a highly differentiated brand, and of that, I'm proud of that. And so it makes the effort worthwhile, I think. Again, this was not going to be a job that was just my daily rigor, and it was going to be, let's just go keep slugging at it. It was, let's have some fun while we do it. And so I think maybe one of the most rewarding is now we've owned the distillery 3 years, and to watch guests come in and to be able to talk to them. And I mean, touch wood, we have only 5-star ratings by consumers right now, and we have a lot of feedback from consumers. And as you go on Google Maps, you'll see they're all 5-star ratings, or if you go on Yelp, all 5-star ratings. And so we feel very fortunate, and we feel like we're communicating and we're being hospitable. And and the guests are reacting that way. So it's been hard work and a lot of fun.
Sure was the great thing. Well, and like you say, better than too much golf for sure.
Yeah, right. Right.
Did you ever, when you were, you grew up in the US, right? We didn't speak specifically about that.
I grew up in
Uh,
North Carolina.
North
Small
Carolina.
town.
Yeah. So did you ever think that you would be you must have been somewhat ambitious, but either president of Coca-Cola or owner of a distillery or an entrepreneur or when you were growing up? Or
Beyond my wildest dreams.
beyond your wildest
I think I
dreams?
did indeed want to move out of my small town and try to make my way in life by moving around a bit, and I didn't want to stay pigeonholed, and I just chose that. But as you know, as a young man or as a kid, you just have to go for it and see where it takes you. And so I feel very fortunate. Yeah.
That'd be some advice you would pass down because you've had a very successful life and you're continuing with that
Yeah.
success to take some chances and go for it and move
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. And a lot of young people that come through here, they ask me that. And one of the first things I say is, if you get the chance to go abroad and work, unless there's some really unusual circumstances, I would jump at the chance. And I would jump at the chance because becoming a minority in a marketplace is good for you. It helps you understand yourself better, and it helps you place a little less importance on who you think your culture has given you. And you can see the world through another person's eyes or another population. My kids never had any prejudices. They were children of the world. And, we just didn't think in terms of prejudice. We thought everybody's the same and we just want to work with everybody. So that's usually my first bit of advice to any young person as they're coming out of university or in their first or second jobs in a career is when that opportunity comes to move abroad, I would suggest they take it.
Well, that's terrific advice. I mean, I feel fortunate. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. We had people from all parts of the world coming in and out of our schools, our neighborhoods. I was fortunate enough, our parents did take us abroad as well, partly for that reason, including to Africa. And as a young kid, that's quite an experience. It does change your perspective. Even
Right.
though we've met Africans from Africa as well as African Americans in the neighborhood and at school, when you go to the country, it's different. So it we're really a fascinating career, and you're continuing fascinating things. And it is a lot of fun to come to your distillery. So I recommend to anyone, new Artisan Distillery. It's easy to get to if you're in Dallas. It's centrally located off major roads. If you come in for a trip or a business or you want to have an event, uh, and uh, and you want to hear and meet a very successful businessman and a unique product. Because, like I said, I've never tasted gin, anything like that, anywhere. And I'm not as familiar with bourbon, but that was also very different.
Yeah. Good. Henry, thank you for having me today. It's great to talk to you and great to meet you at the distillery. So let's stay in touch.
We will stay in touch. Again, the new Artisan Distillery, you can Google it online. And Don Short, thank you so much.
Thanks. So thank you, Henry. Take care.